That's some of what you saw a glimpse of there. And then later on tonight, their second, what they basically will have their version of preseason games with the inter-squad scrimmage.
Now, very early on covering the NHL, I had a player say to me prior to a preseason game, a guy that was, on the bubble, trying to make the team. He said, "I need to be good tonight to get another game." He goes, "That's my whole purpose of being here during training camp is to keep getting games, because the more games I get in, that means I'm playing well, and at some point in time, maybe I convince them I belong." Well, there is no preseason. This is it, and this will be the last controlled scrimmage. This is, if you are trying to make this team, if you are trying to convince Pete DeBoer that he needs to go into Kelly McCrimmon's office and say, "No, you are not sending him to Henderson. He's in my 12, or he's in my 6, or he's in my 2. Forwards, defense, goalie. This is it. This is your chance.
Yep.
You get a hat trick tonight. You make Pete DeBoer, you say to himself as he's driving home, as he's driving from T-Mobile home to his house tonight, in his mind, I cannot start the season without Dave Goucher.
Yes, they could.
I've got to have Goucher in my lineup, and I need to go in there, and I need to make a case for it, and I need and what that, because of where they are against the cap, there are other consequences that are attached to those decisions. So if you're looking for a letterman's jacket, letter person's jacket, I guess in today's vernacular, this is it. This is the moment.
All right, Lawman, we're going to invite people to send in their questions as well. Thank you for tuning in today on Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube. Send us your questions. Let us know where you're watching from, and we'll get to as many as we can. That is assistant coach Ryan Craig playing the role of linesman right now. Again, this is normally game day skates are short. This will be one of those as they try to mimic. I would imagine most teams are doing this. Try to mimic a game day routine. Go to your main rink, inter-squad scrimmages to try to get ready for what will be a very different season coming up for the VGK, for the league starting on Wednesday, but of course for the Golden Knights coming up on Thursday against the Anaheim Ducks. To the point, Lawman, as we continue to watch some of the morning skate here, and you just brought it up, and we have several questions that I want to get to, but this one on Twitter, right down the alley you're talking about. With 4 days to go before the Golden Knights, before the season starts for the NHL, for the VGK to get cap compliant, how do they do it? Right now, they're $124,000 over. Where does that money come from? And that was a Twitter question here just a couple of minutes ago.
Yeah, so let's deal with that figure, 124,000. It depends how many players they carry, right? So they can have an active roster. You got to dress 20. So the minimum is 20. You got to have, and I guess you could go with 19 if you had an injury or a situation like that. But
not ideal.
Not ideal. You want to have 12 forwards, 60, or 11 forwards, 70. However, if you're John Cooper, and 2 goalies. So they've got to figure that where they're going to go in terms of how many players they're going to carry. And if they go with 20 and with a certain grouping, you get to 124,000 over, which is not compliant. They can't do that. They have to figure that out. There's a few days in training camp left, and usually these things, when you're talking about $124,000, usually those things solve themselves. Now, I guess you would prefer the problem of not having an injury and not having to waive someone or send someone down, But with every, when you're at 20, there are cheaper players within the organization. Maybe one of that 20 that you would like to start with has to go to the taxi squad to start, and that is the other factor. Is you're going to put 6 players, a goalie and 5 skaters, maximum of 5. You can go with 1 and 3 or 1 and 4 or 1 and 5. Those are the combinations you can go with. You have to have a third goalie, and then you can have a maximum of 5 more skaters. They don't count against the cap. So, players that aren't waiver eligible. I think Cody Glass is really the only one that could go to the taxi squad and not have to clear waivers. You make decisions that way. If you pick another player that is in your planned 20 that is eligible, that requires waivers to get to the taxi squad. We won't attach a name to it because I don't want to start any speculation. But if you have a player that requires waivers and you decide, he makes $3 million or $2 million or $1.5 million or whatever, that could get us our breathing room. Let's put him on waivers and put him on the taxi squad, and then when someone gets hurt, we'll bring him back up. You might lose him. There are other teams in the NHL that are looking at Vegas right now and realizing the situation they're in. They're talking to their pro scouts, and they're, listen, if they put Goucher on waivers, does he fit with us? Can we afford him? There are teams that could afford him, could afford that player. And if we claim him, are we going to use him? Now, I've seen it. I've seen speculation on a number of players, and again, I'm not going to use names. That's not fair. But when you're as good as the Vegas Golden Knights are, your players are good. That's why your team is good. So when you think about putting a player on waivers, be prepared to lose him.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question, and I ask it, Gary, in the light of, you try to keep an eye on what's going on in the rest of the sports world, to the point of Pete DeBoer touched on this the other day. Marc-Andre Fleury diving across to try to make a save. I think he did make the save with the stick. Pete DeBoer touched on this the other day that, the NHL, this is a much different world they're going to be entering into coming next week. Not a bubble world for them anymore. The NHL could not have had any better results than what they did in the return to play. No positive tests. It was terrific in terms of that. The point of learning from the other sports, baseball, football, basketball, the NFL has 3 playoff games starting today. The Cleveland Browns, who are going to be in the playoffs for the first time in 18 years, their head coach, Kevin Stefanski, unavailable, tested positive for COVID, along with 4 other coaches, won't be on the sidelines today when they take on the Steelers. If you look around the league, right, Dallas Stars had to shut their facility down. They're not going to play any earlier than the 19th of January. They had 8 members test positive, 6 players, 2 members of the support staff. Columbus has had some issues. Penguins canceled practice today due to some exposure, no positive tests. If a player, heaven forbid, tests positive, how does that affect? They still count against the cap. Is that correct? How does that work? We're talking some math here. Heaven forbid the Golden Knights run into some of this. Pete DeBoer says he feels it's inevitable. You're probably going to have to deal with some of this. It's just the way the world is right now. It's everywhere. How does that affect?
Well, it doesn't count against the cap if he's, depending on how long he's
test
removed
positive,
for, right?
has to quarantine.
Yeah.
That money that's what
taxi squad is
exactly.
for, right?
So
that player
comes
comes off,
that way.
and then you bring that guy up, and the guy that fills in, his salary counts against the cap. So the
point of it taking care of itself, heaven forbid that, we've seen it in so many other sports.
Well,
right?
for sure. Like I said, the problem of having to adjust your roster is a better problem than having to deal with an injury.
Exactly.
It just is because, we saw what George McPhee and Kelly McCrimmon did in year 1, where they sent Shea Theodore and Alex Tuck to the American League and said, you guys made the team, but we've got some cap issues that we need to sort out. So you're going to go to the American League for a little while. And now, could a situation like that happen again? Again, Glass is the only guy, and right now he's slated to be one of their 20 and to play center ice and to be on their power play and to play a pretty important role with this team. Plus, Henderson Silver Knights aren't playing. Cody Glass hasn't played hockey in a year. You want him playing games right away. So that'll be those things are they'll solve themselves at some point in time because they have to be solved. So there are ways for the Golden Knights to get compliant, and they will. I just want to go back to the COVID thing for a second because the team that handles this the best, and some of it is out of your control, but some of it isn't. If you are, Brian Burke was talking about this on a radio station in Canada. well, I heard it this morning on a podcast. He was talking about it last week. He said that if he was the general manager of a team, he would institute what he would call like a buddy system, and the rule would be if one guy gets it from your buddy pair, you're both out. No, you can't do that. Like I don't really understand how, but I get what he's saying is the guys need to police themselves, and it needs to be where you're not in a bubble, but it needs to be home rink. Get the groceries delivered by Amazon Prime or whoever else it is, and live a pretty quiet lifestyle. The whole thing here is you're getting paid a lot of money. There is a team that has been built that is capable of winning a Stanley Cup. Having it derailed because, you want to go out for dinner or you whatever, you know what I mean? Like it can't happen. And it's the protocol put together by Jay Millette and his staff here at City National Arena. Like I don't know what people realize. Like we don't go anywhere near the players.
No exposure at all.
There's no exposure. Like it is, and normally, like on a game day like this, you and I would leave this set and go straight into the dressing room and have conversations and talk to Pete DeBoer face to face. Like there's none of that going on. There's tons of places within the building we're not allowed to go. We're not allowed to park in the same parking lot. Like they are not fooling around here. So everybody has to buy in, and that's an edge. And I'm not saying that the Dallas Stars were irresponsible or the Columbus Blue Jackets or my understanding is
Tampa Bay. I think
Tampa has got some issues. The Pittsburgh Penguins canceled their practice today. Tampa was going to have fans. They have been having fans for the Toronto Raptors. No longer. They have said they're, for the time being, they will be fanless. So that's, obviously this season is very expensive for owners. There's, a lot of people are relying on this getting started and going off. It's not going to go off without a hitch, but as hitchless as possible. And a little extra care is required.
Well, something that, the Golden Knights have touched on, and Pete DeBoer mentioned it in his media availability the other day, doing things right most of the time is not good enough.
Yeah.
Especially in the world we're living in right now. You're continuing to watch Morning Skate here from City National Arena, our training camp coverage presented by Martin Harris Construction. The Golden Knights, this will be a quick one for them today because it is in essence their morning skate. Later on today, they'll head down to T-Mobile, have an inter-squad scrimmage tonight for the second time in 3 days, all with an eye towards the season opener coming up on January the 14th, this Thursday, of course. Just a couple of hellos to pass along. Thank you for checking in on VGK Worldwide. Yoni, I apologize, but thank you for tuning in from Finland. Duff on Facebook, so was Yoni, but Duff's watching from Southampton in the UK. Wes on Facebook from Vancouver Island. Glenn on Facebook in Anchorage, Alaska, and Cassandra watching in Oahu. Is that Hawaii? Oahu. Is that spelled right? I don't know. That could be a typo. No, I think it's probably just my eyes. That Oahu. I've never been to Hawaii. I'd like to go. But anyways, thanks for checking in and watching us, courtesy of VGK Worldwide. A couple of more questions, Gary, coming in.
Sure.
Ron on Twitter wants to know, with the VGK going so deep in the playoffs last year, do you think that'll help or hurt them at the start of this season?
Well, it will help them, and I will defer to Pete DeBoer on this. I asked him the other day. This is very similar to the training camp they had prior to Phase 3, or it was Phase 3 prior to the playoffs, where the players had been off for a long time. They came back, and I wanted to know, how would he compare where the team was before it went into the playoffs and where it is now? And he said on fitness and preparedness, pretty close. Both situations, they were excellent. 9 out of 10, 9.5 out of 10, 10 out of 10, right around in there. In terms of understanding how he wants them to play, they're way ahead. When they broke in March, he'd only been coached for, 5 weeks?
Yeah, pretty much.
And hadn't even barely had any practice time with them. They didn't understand that all of his systems weren't implemented. All of the little things that he wanted to do weren't all, kind of part of their their secondhand nature, their vernacular. Now they are. They've been through a playoff run together. They all know how Pete DeBoer wants them to play, and he's continued to install things throughout that time. And now he's got another training camp to fine tune all that stuff. In his opinion, they're ahead of where they were prior to the playoffs. So that playoff run indeed helped them because it helped them learn hockey, according to Pete DeBoer.
And I would imagine as well, when you look at it, Gary, all the teams that went into the bubble and they had that experience of, there were 24 teams with the expanded format over the summertime, their ability to get ready in phase 3, get ready to go into the bubble, and just what that was like to really kind of restart everything, to reignite the season. And the Golden Knights have talked a lot about how much they benefited from that experience, and something they hope that they can carry over here as they get going. William Karlsson did a media availability the other day, Gary, and he said, I think he was asked what's he most intrigued by when he looks at the schedule, and he said, well, the pace of the schedule is bananas, which will lead to, you see a lot of this in the playoffs when you're playing a 7-game series against a team, right? All of these this year, with the exception, they get 2 4-gamers, right? 4 in a row against Arizona, pretty much right off the bat. They play Anaheim twice and then 4 in a row against Arizona. 4 in a row against Colorado in February, which is part of what looks like it's going to be an outdoor game in Tahoe. But that can breed some great rivalries and some hatred when you see teams night after night.
And it's not the playoffs. So in the playoffs, like for a player to fight and to miss 5 minutes of a playoff game, it's a big decision. But in a regular season, if a guy does something to you and you're tired of him, you don't even think twice about that. Yeah. You're happy to sit the 5 minutes if you can punch that guy in the lips. Like if that's the trade-off in the regular season, it's no contest. Maybe later on in the season when you're fighting for positioning and for playoff slotting, maybe you think about it a little bit more. But for the most part in the regular season, when that hatred boils over, you do something about it. And that discipline changes in the postseason. The whole point here is, I think in one of my stories recently, the little tagline to, one of my notes was, "There will be blood," and I fully expect there to be a little bit of violence in some of these games.
Well, and the interesting part is, if you do decide you want to go at it with a guy, you're probably going to see him again 2 nights later. So that the format is bananas. 56 games in 115 days. Those are the last. Looking right now on your screen, Marc-Andre Fleury and goaltending coach Mike Rosati just about to kind of wrap things up here at Morning Skate.
Well, I'll tell you a little story about that. Stu Grimson, I got to know Stu pretty well. He was married to a girl from Winnipeg, and anyways, we had friends, common friends, and then Stu and I did some work together on radio. And he told me he was playing. It was a back-to-back. Stu was playing for Edmonton and Dave Brown was playing for Calgary, or maybe I've got it flipped. Anyways, they fought on the Friday night and Stu won. And he went from the sheer exhilaration of having beat up Dave Brown to, as he was skating in the penalty box, he was like, "Oh my God, I got to fight him again tomorrow night." Because, you get the best of Dave Brown on at any time. Yeah. The next time you're playing, you got to answer that bell again. So there will be, it will be fascinating to see how players, that's going to be part of what gets managed this year.
It's a season like no other.
It really is.
The schedule, everything realigned for this year, the rivalries, the Golden Knights only playing 7 other opponents throughout the regular season, 8 times apiece. And as we said, it all gets going here pretty soon, coming up on Thursday night at T-Mobile, of course, and then another one Saturday against the Anaheim Ducks, the first 2 games of the season. As you see, those are a couple of the VGK goaltenders, along with Mike Rosati, just kind of getting towards the end of morning skate here.
Logan Thompson, I think, standing there beside Fleury.
Right? Yeah. The lefty. Thompson's easy enough to pick out, the left-handed goaltender. But as we said, the Golden Knights will have a little bit more time to get ready for the season, and then they are off and running as they get ready for a new campaign. It's when you look at it, Gary, and this is something that Karlsson touched on the other day, a couple of interesting notes. One is he was disappointed with his season last year, goal scoring wise, production wise. Basically said it that he if you look at it, he had 43 in year one. He had 24 in year two. He had 15 last year, but that was in a shortened. He played 63 games, as did they. Curious to see if he feels he can do more offensively. But then he talked about the pressure overall of this team. It's nuts when you think about it. This is their fourth year in the league, and since that ridiculous run in year one, they have been a team where the expectations have been sky high for them. Gone to the conference final twice in 3 years. It's the same this year, but you want that as a team. You want those expectations. They're through the roof.
Well, the opposite is not good.
No, the opposite is,
you haven't played in over almost a year, right?
Exactly. There were 7 teams.
You're one of those 7 teams that they
Yep.
would love to be in that situation.
Yeah.
Carlson's shooting percentage, year one, it was right around 20 almost all year long. And it has not been the same ever since. And that's a factor. He's fought some injuries, and I think, remember for the longest time he couldn't take any draws. Well, that means that there's something wrong in the hand area, and that has something to do with how you shoot the puck. So, I think that's been a factor for him, and he seems quite healthy right now. Big season for him, and that whole line. Riley Smith was fantastic last year, and I'm sure he wants to repeat. Jonathan Marchessault, he hasn't made any bones about it. He wasn't happy with the season last year, so that line I'm curious to watch because there are other players in the Golden Knights roster now that would like to be in that top 6. Alex Tuch comes to mind. Chandler Stevenson is up there right now. Cody Glass is on the third line right now. There's going to be some internal competition, and if one of the things we know about Pete DeBoer, he is not loyal to combinations. Loyal to people, not loyal to combinations, and he'll make changes on the fly.
Just to note, by the way, a lot of people have been asking about whether tonight's scrimmage will be streamed or shown on TV. It will not be. So just an inter-squad scrimmage for the Golden Knights tonight as they try to gear up for the season opener coming up on Thursday. So no coverage of that, but then, of course, we'll have all of our shows leading up to Thursday night throughout the week, and then we get going for real come Thursday. You mentioned Nick Waugh, Gary. It's, you look at a couple of years ago, he's an enormous part of Charlotte winning the Calder Cup in the AHL, where he's playing against a couple of his Golden Knights teammates. And now you've got he along with Cody Glass. It looks like they could make up. A lot of this camp has been Glass, Waugh, and Tuch. 3 pretty good young players that, ceiling for them.
I love that combination for a couple of reasons. Number one, Waugh can really play well down low in the defensive zone. And Cody Glass wasn't drafted to check.
No.
Now, you got to check, but that wasn't the ability that caught Bobby Lowe's eye. It was his ability to create, and so if and we've heard DeBoer talk about this quite a bit, that you have combinations that kind of that take on those responsibilities of a center. It's not like the way it was once, where you were the center, you had all of these tasks you had to complete. Well, now they split some of those tasks up. And, if Waugh can sort of play center in the defensive zone and take those responsibilities, and Glass can do it in the offensive zone, I think that's a really good combination. That's a well-rounded piece there. And then I think, Alex Tuch, you want him to have a really creative player on that line with him, because he can finish and he can take off, and there's lots of things he can do if you have the right guy distributing the puck to him. Well, Cody Glass is that guy.
It's a lot of things that intrigue you about camp, right? And then as they get into the games for real, and Pete DeBoer touched on this the other day, can somebody like Nick Waugh add some more layers to his game? Cody Glass, you've touched on this, Gary. The Golden Knights drafted him. He was 179 pounds. I think now he's 210?
210. Yeah,
so
they say he put on 17 pounds of muscle,
which is fantastic
since that injury, and that's a dramatic change in the young man. And it's funny, before I saw him, recently before camp started, coming into the parking lot one day, and before we were booted out of the player parking lot, and he got out of his car and he had shorts and a t-shirt, and I just looked at him and I was like, different guy.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Those are pipes, not pipe cleaners.
And then the other, my legs are the pipe cleaners. And then the other question, the other part.
Hold on a second.
Yeah,
Just
pipe
for
cleaners.
the record, I don't know who won COVID, you or Shane Nagy, but you look fantastic.
This is a lot of this is just a lot of protein and a lot of working out. I don't want to say I enjoy it. I don't think it's enjoyable, but something to do coming out of quarantine.
I don't like it.
You're not alone. I'll tell you that much. You're not alone. One more for you, Lawman, and then we'll wrap things up with the guys off the ice. The way that this season is designed. This is Joel on Facebook from Duluth, Minnesota.
Duluth, Minnesota. Fitger's in.
There you go.
Great spot.
You've been there.
Gander Mountain. Some real good Duluth spots.
How will this year affect prospects in their development? You've got the AHL, the shortened season.
Well, great question. The Western Hockey League came out yesterday and said they're committed now to playing a 24-game season. So that's Peyton Krebs is going to play 24 games.
Yeah.
Not enough.
No.
So it will be interesting, and there's that agreement between the CHL and the NHL. You know, a guy like Krebs, he can play in the NHL. Can't be on the taxi squad and cannot play in the American League. Not if the Western Hockey League is going to provide a place for him to play. That's the agreement that they have between those two leagues. And then the American League, they've got a framework, is what they call it, and some teams have opted out. Some teams aren't. Some American League teams are not going to play this year. So NHL teams have combined their players on one roster. So that will have an effect. If the coach, this has always been interesting to me when they've had splits. The coach works for Vancouver, but St. Louis has players on that roster as well. Well, the players from Vancouver are going to get preference. They're going to,
Sure.
You know what I mean? Whether even if it's just sort of subconscious, there's a million things that will affect prospects this year, and the ability to play games. I don't know if they're going to play playoff games in the American League. A GM told me a long time ago, the learning curve for a young player in the playoffs versus regular season, the ratio was 2-1. You learn twice as much in a playoff game as you do in a regular season game. And if you're not playing playoff games, that affects them. If a guy gets stuck on the taxi squad and for whatever reason, he's not getting games in the American League, he's just practicing all year. Imagine going a year without playing a game.
No.
I'm sure that won't happen, but the games, anytime you're on the taxi squad, you're not playing.
To your point of, you can't have guys sitting on that taxi squad for
They're
long
going to have to move
periods.
them back and forth.
Rotate,
It's going to have to be a rotation.
in and out,
Yep.
for sure. All right, Lawman, we're going to, speaking of wrapping it up, we're going to do it here as the Golden Knights have already put the finishing touches on their morning skate.
Dave has to go work out.
I'm going to do something, evidently. The Golden Knights are going to have their pregame skate done and then scrimmage here at T-Mobile a little bit later on. Of course, thank you for joining us. Our training camp coverage brought to you by our friends at Martin Harris Construction, and our bulletin brought to you by NextGen. Of course, tomorrow, practice for the Golden Knights here at CNA at 11:15. That's the schedule right now, and we'll have more coverage here. Stay tuned for all the updates on Twitter, and also some training camp diaries, which are pretty cool on our Twitter as well, presented by Station Casinos, or check it out on VegasGoldenKnights.com. We have daily podcasts presented by Jack in the Box. There's all sorts of things. There's no excuse for you not to know what's going on with your VGK. But thanks for tuning in this morning. We'll talk to you next time. As we said, our training camp bulletin presented by NextGen. For Gary Lawless, Dave Goucher, wishing you a great Saturday.